Well done. If you've managed to find your way along from part 1 to part 2 on the internet, and here you are on part 2, well done. Jolly good. It looks like you've made it. To continue further into this discussion, I mean, is it a discussion if it's your alter ego you're talking to, or an alternative character that you've invented? Is that a dialogue? I don't know. If it's improv, it kind of feels like it, which is weird, and I hope you enjoy the silliness of this sort of satire kind of flavor of delivery here on some of these quite serious issues. Parental advisory warning, and also just kind of sensitive people don't want to discuss the sort of grittier sides of politics and gender matters and things like that. Issues contained within this part are to do with male solidarity, the position of the male um, victim of suicide, to be specific. Thinking this is literally built backwards from that. In other words, why so many men choosing that death is preferable? What kind of lives are men living that are worse than death itself? Well, I can't answer that question fully. I don't know who can. The point would be I can answer that question to some extent. I feel confident about being able to answer a large number of those deaths with policy, with real cultural comment, and I want to try and reach out to the feminist, the very woke feminist, the most woke of woke feminists that there is one that doesn't fall into traps of hating all men or seeing that all men are all the same, and is one that realizes that there surely are men who believe in things like romance. I'd like to refer to one of my ancestors, Robert Burns. So again, this is a little bit like the way I refer to samurai and storytelling. Okay, sometimes like the ideas of stuff or what matters in politics. That's why the politician does not need to be the journalist. When you see our current politicians stand up there and they suddenly start reading out the news of horrible things that have happened under their, you know, presiding over such total ghastly failure and acting like it's someone else's fault. It's really unhelpful. I try to stay grounded. Okay, what can I deliver? What can I offer? My own little tuppence on this for what's going on with men. I think there's a lost boy problem. I think there's a great deal of societal problems. I think there's real hope. I think we can have union. Is what I'm driving at, guys. I'm wanting that very 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 woke feminist. I would hope to see that what kind of bits you've got and what kind of current sex gender dynamic you may have ought not really affect one's judgment. So, in other words, me being judged with ill because of the behavior of other men is a major grievance in my life. I'm very, very angry about having been treated with a lack of justice entirely around my own gender, specifically. Yes, for sure. And it happens to be the one that most people listening, they'll be like, how dare you even discuss the subject of gender? Why? Because of the gender that I belong to. And thus the paradox of hating, it's not a paradox, it's just a complete failure of wisdom, really. A wise person doesn't hate anyone because of their gender. I was taught, really, in my house, in my culture, in my family, men are always the baddies. And women, somehow, no matter what they do, no matter how disgraceful and appalling what they do, are always victims. And you can imagine I've learned this is not actually feminism, guys. All right, a lot of people might think that it is. I don't think that it is. Who am I to say so? But I think this is actually another phenomenon of a kind of toxic victimhood thing, and is a besmirchment or a defilement or bizarrely a kind of a mask worn version of non feminism, I would say. God forgive me, guys, if I'm wrong, but I don't think that there are a lot of behaviors going on. For example, where um, being a man, right, just being a man is a legit target in some of these liberal, lefty, ultra left liberal circles. Politically speaking, you're just a legit target, um, and they have sunk into the level of revenge seeking, hateful, unable to see goodness in anyone presenting as male. And so we have become very divided. And when we are divided, we are conquered. When we're united, we're very strong. We're near invincible. Um, we've been invincible this far when we're united. We're all divided now. I would like to be a uniter. Is that a word? A union minded type person. Gender justice really is about trying to answer to the frustrations, the legitimacy of all gender injustice must have a seat at my political table. I don't know what your political table is if the scores and scores of men opting to take their own lives, choosing that death is preferable to the scenarios that they're facing. It is my job, and unfortunately, just like a lot of issues of late, some issues get left in the fascist poop bin, shall we say, shit bin. Do you mean shit bin? The fascist shit bin? You mean that people stuff that the lefties don't care about ends up falling into the hands of fascists, and thus we get horrible toxic problems and cyclical issues and all the rest of it. And your sort of argument, which is that at me, even despite having the certain bits that belong to the male species and all that, people ought not to treat us with contempt as if we are the people that have done the bad thing by default. One is not Warren Jeffs or something. Do you know what I mean? Well, Warren Jeffs, that's quite a deep cut reference. Well, that Warren Jeffs guy was just doing what most of these toxic men want to do in their head. I mean, it's like that little beast that lives in your head, the one you're talking about, the one condemned for all eternity to kind of haunt the world, looking to get satisfaction among the flesh. Oh, it's ghastly. You've got a trigger warning on, haven't you? Parental advisory. Yeah, right. So do you know what I mean? There's a toxic and rapey, creepy people in there, and the trouble is with the Trump winning the election, it's like, well, we're all like that. But hold on a minute, it was a bunch of girls that voted for him too. I mean, I didn't vote for the bugger. I would never vote for the goddamn asshole of a man. Quite like to give him a good fucking, kick up the ass, frankly, given a chance. Same here, man. And I guess it's like, how can men who vote and campaign and call out and spend all the live long day trying to be a feminist, trying their very best to meet the approval, whatever this goalpost moving issue is of just how puritanical one can be, how bereft of masculinity one must have to be in order to appease this. It just is impossible. Forget it. Especially when the judgments of those, when you realize and you see it happening, you're like, wow, okay, so this one can literally vote for a rapist, can hand cash over to a rapist, who phone up and buy a book, a copy of the American Constitution with, or the Bible, and the Bible and the Constitution squished together. It's such a sacrilege to both things. It's an act of philosophical and political depravity. I don't even. It's just a violation. Right, calm down. Ian's gone into the stratosphere of madness. This happens sometimes. Don't panic. You settle down in a moment. Now, look. I know what you mean. It's maddening because what that means is, and the reason it's maddening, the reason I legitimize that, you have to understand that most humans, when they're reacting with anger and rage and outrage and all the rest, all these things, one must understand that there is probably something legitimate going on there. There's almost certainly something legitimate going on there. And in this case, what this man is suffering with is called the justice monkey problem. This is why it's justice. See, gender justice is why it's so triggering and upsetting, and you're getting a final trigger warning before we go on and talk about this stuff that only the fascist side of politics talks about. And if you let the fascists talk about it, then the fascists will all clean out and they'll do great. They'll have all the men, all the angry men over there, and all the angry girls over there, and it'll be boys versus girls forever, and we're all stuffed. Not literally, of course, no one will get stuffed unless it's a non-consensual horror show and not a romantic thing. Wait, what did you talk about Robert Burns earlier on? Why don't you finish that strand of thought before you move on? Yeah, romanticism, right? Sorry about that, folks. I've calmed down a wee bit now, but I might start raging again later. You've been warned. Robbie Burns was famous for what? Romanticism and socialism and stuff. Look, we need that now. Yeah, we need to teach. I think men need to remember that the act of actually being, worthy and being chosen, and at least acting like you're interested in romancing. Like the birds of paradise do their little dances. Woo! Oh, dude, don't do that. Don't do a dance. Yeah, you're lucky you didn't see that. To do a little boogie woogie thing to let the girls pick them, and if they don't do a good enough boogie woogie, they get the fuck out of here. Off you go. This peacock spiders are the same, right? Peacock spiders are exactly the same, but then they get eaten. Yeah, he wasn't all that great, so just had him for lunch. Either get laid or get lunch, one or the other. Or you could do both if you want, if you're a proper lady spider. Listen, that's why they call her the Black Widow. Told you this was Trigger City. This is meant to be a semi-serious political thing, and I've made it absurd and juvenile, and I'm sorry. It is really shameful. We're trying to talk about very serious issues. Look, it's this justice there, for Christ's sake. You meant to say when you got to justice thing, you meant to be raging. Is that it? Yes, mate, exactly. Your justice monkey. It's the little primal kind of part of you that knows right from wrong, deep down, regardless of what's going on around you. It knows right from wrong. And so listen to that is my advice through this. Particularly if things I'm saying are driving you mad. I'm very sorry about that. That's not the intention. It's more catharsis for me. Political discussion, political comment, political debate, hopefully a political campaign of some sort of impact on opening up ideas about, well, is it really, listen, for the toxic masculine side of the debate, look at how it is for you when this happens. Look what that's like for your mate when this happened. And look at this and try to empathize with what it must be like on the other side of the gender divide, the gender hate divide. And thus we can try and find some sort of common ground and, I don't know, try and find some reconciliation. I'd like to try and bring about some gender peace in the world. And so thanks for listening to all this madness. You absolute legends. All the best now. Thanks very much. Next slide, old chap. Next slide. Remember, just moving on. Oh, the good Liberty Bell. Oh, cool. Here we go. Okay, before we take another step in the direction of the sort of silliness and whatnot, why don't you establish some safe grounds for people before you go too far? Yes, I agree. Actually, I feel that. Yeah, because it gets a bit sort of creative and fruity and stuff going forward. But look, this is a kind of position that I've tried to summarize in this phrase here. Never ever a what about men candidate. Do you understand? So all of this kind of whataboutism is not useful at all. However, there cannot and must not be tolerance of blaming all men as if all men are guilty of the actions of some appalling men, right? So, nor can there be, I think, going further than that, the attitude that masculinity is inherently toxic, right? Because this, to be honest, I was grown, I raised, was grown. You know what I mean? I experienced a childhood where the main dominant story arc was one of perpetual female victimhood and perpetual male badness and wrongness and wrongdoing. Now, however, whatever, what would you say, legitimacy or reasonability there is behind having trauma and fear and anxiety about certain men, it doesn't ever legitimize hating all men in that way. Like you can't have an all male hate attitude, an all male fear attitude is just the same thing turned around the other way. Because to the audience that's very triggered by that, I'm sorry, but I have the reason I have evolved this position is from a well-known app called BetterHelp. What are you talking about now? I'm sharing an experience. I want to get this experience in up front before anyone just hangs up on me and just doesn't continue the video or whatever. When I was going through a traumatic thing, and I was referred to a group when I was using the Better Health service, which I strongly recommend you do not use. Nobody should be using this. If you're using this, it's quite likely you're being exposed to some toxic nonsense. Um, Blame the victim, absolute horse manure. So when I, for example, like telling people they need to work on their boundaries, like if you're telling an abuse victim they need to work on their boundaries, you don't understand abuse. Abuse is something where somebody does not respect your boundaries. In fact, they are targeting your boundaries for the reasons of upsetting you. Like you cannot have boundaries around an abuser. That's why they're an abuser. That's what makes it an abuse dynamic. So telling people to work on their boundaries and stuff like that, or telling people to stop doing abuse patterns if they are doing them. Look, the trouble is abuse patterns are things that only the abuser can fix, that not you can fix. That if you stay with an abuser, they will abuse you. And there is legitimately two dimensions, multi dimensions, four dimensions, multiverse of abuse in the world, to be honest, right? And to think about every single thing that's going on in the world through the lens of boys versus girls is extremely toxic and helps fascism win. It helps create disunity because I hate to point this out, in the fascist cultures, in the fascistic, very devout religious cultures and that, the women there are completely conforming to what the men want, and they go along and vote with horrible misogyny all the time. We can, like, it's a culture of domination, right? So they dominate very, very effectively, right? We have to get clear about who are the baddies. Finding nuance and complaint in my work will be easy. You can do this all day. I mean, knock yourself out. It'll help me learn and grow if you're right, or it'll help prove some points of mine that I think are quite well articulated here. That if you fall into the trap of thinking about all men the same, if you start to judge anyone that you meet based on preconceptions about a gender, Like, what does that say about you? You've got sexism. You're not doing feminism. You're doing sexism. Would be my argument. And I would like to continue feminism and be a supporter of feminism and align myself with feminism as very best I can from my limited male testicular naivete position about the miracle of life and the miracle of being a female. I don't have that experience. But newsflash, you guys don't have experience for what it's like to be me either. No amount of meeting other men. And I said this to a clinician once. I'm like, look, you sat here and said, I remind you of patients you've met before because of X, Y, and Z. I hate to break it to you, man, but you remind me of every other doctor I've met and all. Do you want me to treat you exactly the same way I've treated every other awful, horrendous, brain melting, gaslighting, patient harming, cannot stop doing harm type doctor that I've met, or should I treat you like you're an individual person right now? And I mean, the salient point again is that we all do fall into these traps. But the more one is prone to this thinking of assuming that you know an entire group or that you know a person that you're just meeting, and I fall into it all the damn time. I mean, keep me in check, please, audience of mine, tiny but apparently existing audience. Unbelievable. Thank you for being an audience of mine for listening. Hopefully, this isn't going to trigger you too much, and any triggering is done in jest and meant to produce debate, an argument, and something that he calls, the Scottish random calls a stramesh. Is that right? Yeah, stramash, right? Yeah, so stramashing, Scottish, it's a Scottish word, right? But I want to try and co-opt it, borrow it, utilize it a wee bit to indicate that sometimes it's okay to have a bit of an argument, right? That is maybe even a quite a heated one because we care about the things that we care about and we feel very strongly about them. And sometimes it rubs up against other very passionate people. Now, for the left to overcome divide and conquer, which is what this is all about, gender justice, making it a gender justice campaign, a universal gender justice campaign, rather than an explicitly feminist campaign, but hope that the universal gender justice campaign can include feminism. I mean, based entirely on feminism, really, if you think about it, but just kind of like a new cultural language that can hopefully get us out of this damn cul-de-sac of I hate all girls and girls hate all men. And that is what it's like in that Better Help group. To finish the story and finish the slide, I sat in a group of men listening to them whining and moaning and doing the male victimhood thing. And it was the most unedifying, humiliating thing to witness. I don't think men should do this in groups. I don't know. Like, I've been silly. Like, what do I know? I'm not qualified. My point would be, my point to the group was, and I hope that those lads remember me and whatever, was the thing: you are exporting all of your blame for your problems onto someone else, right? But not only is it just someone else, it's an entire group of people you don't know. And I said, I will not have loved ones grow up and behave in this manner. Treating all women the same is just exactly as toxic, identical, in no difference whatsoever, treating all men the same. Treating men ill because of the behavior of other men is such a constant and chronic feature of our justice system. It is done as a way of scapegoating and getting out of grotesque failure to do jobs to protect the innocent and so on. So hating all men is extreme folly. However, you will not get the "what about men" thing because, like, honestly, it doesn't. The statistics are what they are. Okay, it's not really even a debate. Like, statistically speaking, if you are the male target of things, one has to be humble enough to comprehend your minority status and then be mindful of what the majority is. But also, in my case, try and see the overlap. Try to create union between the groups of minorities in every gender who are suffering, being targeted. Why? Because of their gender alone. Does that make sense? Well, kind of. What have you said? Liberty or death? Politics, what does that mean? Well, that's what I think my politics are liberty or death for real. Because it's like saying, if you're removing rights like the kind of rights that I've put forward in Epoch Nova, if your job entails doing that, if you're participating in that through the state or through a corporation or whatever, you are doing something which I think is profoundly immoral. Absolutely more morally bankrupt than anything. Something akin to the church abuses, colonialism, slavery. That is the kind of rights that I'm concerned about. Political violations of liberty appall me, and they are akin to death. You may as well be dead if you don't have your liberty. That's my point, guys. So, whatever your gender, I'm your friend. I don't want anyone being treated badly or facing injustice, specifically just because of some aspect of who they are. Okay? Now, in terms of what you did, if you're doing something wrong, if something criminal is going on, etc., blah, 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 it's completely different. This point is about injustice and liberty. And it does happen to lots of different gender dimensions and in different scenarios. There are places where gender dynamics are one way, and there are places where gender dynamics are completely other way. And as always, power always corrupts. And liberty violations, political failures and crimes and whatnot, assaults on liberty, just will not be tolerated by this candidate. Not ever. No, me neither. Down with it. Absolutely. Liberty or death. Yeah, yeah. That's my kind of language. I'll sit a bit longer. Okay, go on. What's next?
Good Lord, man. Is there no part of our heritage that you will not absolutely whore out for your own self indulgent campaign? For goodness sake. Dude, mate, you think I remember what I said about storytelling? Like storytelling and telling stories is very important. People, thankfully, the greatest story ever told is no longer the Bible, thankfully. There are many, many superior stories with superior moral functioning going on in it. And the trouble is, there are no perfect stories, though, right? Oh, that's for sure. I mean, every author try and refer to someone, try and quote a person nowadays, could get absolutely spears and rocks thrown at you because they were a slave owner or they were a serial buggerer or something. I don't know what it might be, but whatever it is they got up to that was horrific and of the age that they were in, is completely undermines the thing that they're saying. Yes, I know. I find this very problematic, mate. I wish I had an answer to this cancellation problem because it's just depressing. I mean, like, for the whole male thing, remember here talking about male, wellness and what every kind of Frodo needs and what every kind of little busted man needs to kind of turn himself into a good hero. You want to go look at the man in the mirror. And you're like, oh, dude, no, not that man. Certainly not in that mirror, if you know what I mean. I wouldn't be going anywhere near that man in any mirrors. Thankfully, that man is not near any mirror, so to speak, right through the mirror, through the veil, so to speak. Anyway, God rest his soul, made fabulous music, beautiful artist, incredible performer, but sort of implication of, and I don't want to get sued. No one, I don't know, but there are definitely some claims and stuff, and they're very credible and all that, and sort of there's some creepy stuff in the old lyrics when you have a look at the pictures. Maybe we're just missing things, like there are icons in our culture. I can't think of any off the top of my head that have a kind of cultural implication. They're in our culture, but they sort of actually have kind of creepy vibe, creepy connotations. I don't, like maybe like even around about the Christmas time. Look, don't you start with Christmas. You're a cancel Christmas person. Is that right? Why you cancel Christmas? You think Santa Claus is a pedophile? I didn't say that. That's not what I said. You did. I think you were hinting that there's a paedophile issue with even Santa Claus might be a pedophile. What's the problem with your depraved, woke mind? For goodness sake, how could you be? How could you think that? Well, look, mate, we've had Jimmy Savile, we've had all these things. Like, we're starting to just learn that maybe there's something. Even the Mahatma, we found out somebody published something. Who published that? Oh, Mr. Kane, hilarious Russell, amazing Russell Kane. Love you. You're a great man. Thank you very much. I learned a lot from your show, particularly this thing. Absolutely bubble burst. Can worms open? Worms, but not those worms. Nobody. A can of worms open all over the place regarding the greatest people of all time have had these actually quite morally depraved actions going on, and does that mean that all men are like this? Are we all monsters? That's what I try to figure out. Am I a monster? Are you a monster? Are we a monster? Well, since you're just a sort of psychological event character I've invented, I'm pretty sure we have the exact same problems, to be honest. Maybe you've got problems that I don't have. Well, but there's a lot of problems you've got that I don't have. I'll tell you that straight away. Why don't we be serious for a moment? No, no, no. Look, I don't have an answer to those questions. I don't, guys. Okay, like I'm trying to navigate it like everybody. The only thing we can ask, I think, of one another is good intent and growth, right? When it comes to male behavior, male conduct, male attitudes, male culture as a collective, there are some problems, aren't there? And those problems are inherited, dodgy old man wisdom, bad Gandalf wisdom, right? And we need new Gandalf wisdom. We don't need new Gandalf. It's not like chucking out all the old Gandalf wisdom. It's just take the real proper Gandalf wisdom and sort it out from the creepy old buggers making up excuses for things wisdom. Okay? Let's move on. Next slide. So try not to be too silly in this one. Let's just make this quite a quick one as well, because like we say, that there is there has to be a space at the gender justice table for men and fathers, right? That's my addition to wokeism. I would like to try and unite the kind of typical gender justice movements, those who are experiencing real, measurable, demographically overwhelming injustice, right? There is, however, a minority there that is unrepresented if we do that, which is the innocent male target of kind of borderliner personality abuse type stuff, narcissistic abuse, the Johnny Depp type guy who is being baited and messed with and screwed with by a predator, and there are not as many of them as there are. There's not as many of this dimension of abuse and neglect and injustice. However, when it does happen, it is very deadly, right? So this would be my point as an anti-suicide person, learning from those experiences. Obviously, none of the specifics ever get discussed of that, but I do kind of make general comment about politics that's informed by that experience. Does that make sense? So bum covering there, but the Happy Bars project is a kind of a brand I wanted to make for young people, particularly young men, targeting at men from the age, I mean, really from an age of about, you know, early teens, maybe even, I don't think tween, no, I think probably like, what do you say, from kind of 14, 15, 16, gaining emotional maturity stages, and critical times when rates of loss are very, very high for people who just don't have a reliable um, mentor or kind of person in their life that they can rely on and lean on. I'd like happy bars to feature emotional support in the way that emotional support is offered in many particular charities, which is just like emotional support, being there for a person, doing the kind of things that maybe an AA sponsor would do. Do you know what I mean? Occasionally, there's like a space for, I think, growth beyond what is offered in this particular charity, which I've learned from and been trained by. However, it's also trying to get something into the market. Because remember, I'm kind of a capitalistic kind of person. I have not got the profit motive incentive here, but I do have motive to create jobs and productivity and for people to have nice, healthy working lives. The thing is that happy bars, I imagine a happy bar as being a bit like a driving test. This is what I consider like a mental health driving test. And when you're learning to drive, what do you need to do? You have to have people take you out for a run with your emotions, don't you? You have to have people who coach you, everyone around you coaches you. Imagine like, so happy bars would take the principle of how we all learn to drive and how we make driving a life-saving necessity and a regulated necessity. We will have emotional coping strategies in a similar kind of concept. And of course, it is not obligated that one does this. I personally do not possess a driving license and have no intent in acquiring one, just mainly for the safety of other drivers and motorists. But however, more to do with the fact that, it's just a thing, a blockage I've had or whatever. The skills thing is not there. And that should be very difficult for some people to get through a kind of a test. It's not kind of imposing it on folk is not ideal. However, remember the overall goal is to create a societal shift that reduces the number of losses and also kind of, I would say also, I'm going to add in here, maybe controversially, the kind of things that lead to mass shootings or violence and abuse in the home, reducing. Okay. The kind of things that actually lead to abuse and lead to harm producing behaviors, whether those be self harm producing behaviors or harm producing behaviors towards others, which is also, by the way, kind of cyclical and round we go, the cycles of abuse type thing. So within happy bars, I would want to try and take a lot of what the corrupt and despicable family court systems are doing via court order, doing via force through social services and all these things that the state is doing in an appalling and an abominable way up and down the country right now. Our institutions are a disaster. Corporations and profit making scumbaggery is also not welcome in this sector. And so your only solution is a middle of the road, non-profit, open source campaign where there is job creation. However, that job creation is not exclusively for an elite with a bloody silly degree from a Mickey Mouse institution who are dishing out qualifications in how to dehumanize people. There will not be that in here. I have learned the folly of this from my experience. I will tell you over and over and over again in my cover, dear listener, if you are being harmed or messed with by a medical professional who is claiming to be an NHS health person or whatever the hell it is, get to a private sector person who you can pay, who you can employ, who you can fire if they suck at their job, if they're saying something harmful, something toxic, something retrograde, something that belongs in another century. On these issues of your gender, your rights, who you are is not going to be defined by anyone else, dear listener. Okay? And happy bars will try and fit into that mode of being something that young people can learn very easily to protect them from all these toxic fields of profit run disease, profit run mental health, or state led corrupt institutions where harm is being done by predators for sadistic indulgence. Okay? This is a reality. I don't need to talk about all the decisions that you make or whether you make decisions with your medicine, go this way, go that way, have this operation, do that, whatever it might be. That's all up to you, mate. Okay, that's all up to you, pal. Your liberty. I'm a liberty champion. And when I see things like a giant corporation or a scumbag lefty institution or whoever it is, a member of your family or a church or whoever, if I see any of these things messing with your liberty and who you are, your right to choose your story, your right to write your life for yourself, you will be harmed by that, dear listener. It will hurt you. Dehumanization is a harm. And this happy bars will be a way to catch people suffering that in community and stop them choosing death over this life, which happens all too often. Serious point. 116123, if you're feeling like that. Solidarity to you, dear friend. Next slide. Gandalf. You use the hashtag Gandalf vibes quite a bit. I've noticed you're doing that. That's kind of a hashtag Gandalf vibes. Yes. Looking for people, looking for the storytellers, looking for the wise ones, looking for the the storytelling type, round the fire type guys. Like so, Gandalf's a wizard, obviously. Yes, that helps having the old sorcery and the magic wands and sort of a horse that can travel at the speed of sound or whatever the hell that was and get around quicker than anyone else. You need a shadow fax. Yes, absolutely. What is a lot of reference, a lot of tie-ins, isn't there? I was thinking about. You mean the madness of Denethor? Do you remember the madness? The madness of King Denethor, and he's sending his good son to perish in the combat and mourning his sort of average son. It sort of reminds me of somebody, don't you think? Look, man, I'm no Boromir, yeah. I'm not. No. I think I'm probably a hobbit. But look at it this way, right? The Gandalf thing, Yeah. Think about who doesn't have a Gandalf, right? What is it going to be? You're going to identify a syndrome, like a no lack of Gandalf syndrome. Lack of a Gandalf. It's like a lack of a father figure, isn't it? It's like a lack of it's lack of that father vibe in your life. That's painful, right? That's tragic. It hurts to think of that, you know. Oh, now don't be getting all emotional now. Come on, get to the point. What was the deal? Why is this so this is relevant to male suicide, male victimhood and all these kind of things? Yes, but also I would say more so, right? This is more not to get the violence. Keep the male victimhood violence firmly on standby at the moment, right? This is more. Do you know who I think of with this, right? Hobbits again. Okay, look, no. I mean, in media, the men who obsess over sports, right? Now, I have now. This is not. I'm not being. There are folk who are obsessed over their sport and that who are totally awesome and don't have feature any lack of Gandalf syndrome issues, as far as I can tell. But lack of Gandalf deficit syndrome, GDS. Gandalf deficit syndrome is present in all the Lost Boys. The Lost Boys. We're into J.M. Barrie now. Again, nothing in our heritage, nothing in the British pantheon of genius is safe from this man's pilfering. Dude, I'm a storyteller. It's a storyteller. Look at the Bill. Look, famous example I can think of is Bill Maher ripping into Kevin Smith. Now, I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith. I love him. He reminds me of one of my bestest mates. So I find him absurd and also does my nut in, but I also love him. There's that kind of weird, I love you and I hate you at the same. You annoy me, you do my head in, but I really love listening to you chatting about the silly stories and the kind of escapology that the fantasy world is. Now, why is it an escapology? Why are we prone to this? If you think about the Bible types, right? If you think about the Bible preachy types, yeah, they are trying to tell lofty stories in a lofty way on a Sunday morning and in the third day. You know, they just try and tell these absurd stories in lofty ways. Forgive me, mega church population. The mega church population is who I'm addressing this to, right? Obviously. You have lack of Gandalf syndrome, right? The entire megachurch population, boys, girls, and everything in between, women, men, and all of them, they have a complete and total universal hashtag lack of Gandalf slash Gandalf deficit syndrome because they are telling bogus, awful stories to one another about the world, and those stories are sticking in their head. And if those stories are of hatred and insanity and denethorishness or Smeagolishness or even wormtonguishness. Wormtongue is a bigger and better example, surely, of what we're dealing with at this point in history. But above and beyond that, the lack of a Gandalf can lead you into folly, can it not? Dear Bill Maher is a man who not only does not have the emotional core, the spine, the sheer solar plexus integrity to bawl and cry and rage and rant and care about something like your life depends on it. I pity someone. I pity you, Bill Maher, you poor soul. Kevin and likely and myself, like, oh, what cheeky fucker, what the world is this? Where's this coming from? Running, kicking the nuts, schoolyard bully stuff. And it's like such an exposure. Bill Maher is hateful of he did that religiosity thing, didn't he? He's a great man. Solidarity to you, Bill. I mean, I don't want to be pointing out what a cunt you are sometimes, but I'm a cunt sometimes too. It's okay. Satire, free speech, roast things and whatnot. But isn't that a fucking stunning case right in front of the whole world of I don't get what the point of telling stories and having a creative life and having an artistic outlet and caring about things that matter that are just ideas and are not just money and things I can eat or fuck and smoke. I mean, Christ, I know I love all the things I can eat and fuck, but do not be so basic, sir. You're the basic one. Look, I'm trying not to be basic and get my emotions up about these feelings. There are fathers, there are men, great men. Like my father, my father's father died when my father was very, very young. He was forced to become a father very, very early to his siblings and stuff. And that's why he's such a great, honorable, kind man, and why, unfortunately, he's a target of so much hatred and blame and whining, and it's your fault. And the house I grew up in was one where men were always the folly, men were always to blame. And then there's biases, and we'll come to this later on, but this is me telling my story a little bit. I had to learn to tolerate men. I had to learn to love men. That's why I have antlers tattooed on my arms, guys, because I had to learn that the maleness, competition, the instinct to be, I don't know, the leader, to be the champion, to be super, to have not to be the best at something is kind of honorable. Not to have supremacy, not to dominate, but this is just who we are as men. We have great folly baked into our biology. Unless you teach, unless you have the Gandalf. This is why Gandalf is the grandfather in our society that we don't have anymore. Where are all the Gandalfs? Run for office, please. Hashtag Gandalf, get the fuck into politics and do us a favor and tell some bloody stories that are not to do with women being subjugated and animals being food and the whole world just being here to be consumed or to be a masturbatory garden of neoliberal wankathon, you know? It's just absurd. We have to get the world back into some state of balance. It takes the elders not to reject, because this little man, this Enoch, good lord, he kicks in on the elders. But listen, there must be some Gandalfs out there. Hashtag Gandalf deficit disorder. Wait, do we say a syndrome? It's a syndrome, I think. There's a broad presentation. We'll discuss it as we go along. Right. But this could happen through horrible, I mean, not being silly, but also before we move on. Don't you want to remind the audience that this happens due to class warfare and outrageous reasons? Mate, you know, just like you, one of your champions over there, David Davis, you have grounded me resoundingly well, dear Gandalf. Oh, thank you very much. Yes, we'll point out to you that your audience, don't forget that whether you are in an ethnic minority or a class where you don't have access to justice, have absolutely no access to justice, people who have no access to justice will have absolutely no rights whatsoever to defend even the most basic flaws and the most basic accidents and mishaps and actually just misfortunes and horrible things that happen to people can end up becoming criminology and all sorts of things by the madness of class warfare. Taking out hatred and frustration on other generations and younger people, vulnerable people, is the folly of what? A lack of fatherly responsibility, a lack of masculine determination, of will to be a good person, to be a good man. What on earth are you doing? You're doing folly. You're following your older parents. They are all dying and going out of this world because they're not the Gandalf anymore. They are the Denethors. Do not listen to the Denethors. Listen to the Gandalfs. That's perfect, man. No matter what class you're from, because there's just no excuse. There isn't. I mean, like, it's not to say, oh, there's an excuse for men. That's not what this is about. It's just saying that all of us are human, and all of us can be sort of de-Gandalfed and sort of lack a Sam when we need one. Okay, Dadifesto. I see what you did there. Yes, I know. Yeah, I know. Like, it's a bit cheesy, right? But it's not a manifesto; it's a dadifesto. The point is one does not need to be on the male victimhood bandwagon at all. I don't feel like there is a legit male victimhood bandwagon, but there is a legit father one. Yeah, really, I think there's a legitimate father bandwagon, not a bandwagon as such. Let me just put that. I would say the Dadifesto is a very legit campaign because we have extremely high rates of suicide among fathers. Fathers, I have always heard, and we will hear, you know, within our community anecdotally, that fathers have a very rough time through the court system. This is generally accepted, wisdom, known. My recent experience in life has taught me this is far worse than I ever could have imagined. And this is why that this whole proposal became gender justice and a gender kind of 50-50, not 50-50, but a kind of all sides bollocks. Nothing to do with that. No, 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 no. It's accepting that they're each gender and the genders themselves have their own unique challenges. There's no real sort of, oh, it's this for all of them kind of assumptions that can be made. Dadifesto is a really specifically, I'm not want to let it take over this whole one because maybe give it its own one and then make this one a little bit more about the status quo gender stuff. But let's be absolutely clear that this belongs in this discussion because Dadifesto is about protecting fathers, the children of fathers, who are being targeted because of their gender. So there is no difference with the other ones. Okay, so a little bit in summary here on these issues before we progress. I'm hoping that the audience can accept me as a feminist, an intended feminist, someone trying their best to be a feminist. However, coming from a male position now, I have had to shift my attitudes politically. Those who know me previous to my political career will know. I mean, a sort of extreme feminist, to be honest, some kind of extremist feminist person who I mean, there will be friends in Edinburgh who will be able to recount stories of me showing genuine attitudes of contempt towards men presenting with stories of their challenges and victimhood and whatnot, taking out my hatred that I was taught when I was a kid. As I say, I was raised in a particularly toxic culture about masculinity, and it did very, very deep harm to me. I hope that I've overcome that to some extent, but it took me a long, long time. And also trying to overcome this in politics because we suffer from weaponization and division, so divide and conquer strategies, where instead of the union of man and woman and everything in between, we've got this weird kind of toxic hatefulness towards one another. And it does mean that it's very difficult for an independent candidate to operate because I'm a very strong feminist. I feel extreme rage and outrage about women having their rights violated, being treated with dehumanizing disregard, utilized purely for. I mean, I'm a straight guy, so I mean, I'm kind of obsessed with girls and women, obviously, aren't I? So like, but the disrespect element, harm, it's complete. None of that is acceptable to me. Like, completely unacceptable. Harm, non-consensual activities. What's happening for fathers, and what I'd like to try and do. This is a Herculean task, perhaps, but to try and unite and shut down a lot of the issues with, I suppose, traditional left losing elections because of them hating, and I mean this, hating men on a grand scale, on such a having such outrageous tolerance of that and celebration of that is, I think, really, really becoming an electoral problem. In other words, helping fascism win is what I have accused many, many online people of doing with their "I hate all men" stuff who are on the left, and I think that I've established what my case is on that. But let's just go deeper on it. This Dadifesto proposal is what I want to bring into balance the situation, okay? So, in all the boys versus girls type conversations that I end up getting dragged into, boys versus girls conversations that I end up always on the sharp end of people calling me a misogynist. So, just a constant feature of life. I don't accept that I am one. I'm absolutely sick and fed up, frankly, of engaging with leftists who just meet every single man and treat every single man exactly the same. And those there are girls standing next to them saying that that's legitimate to do so. And you get this kind of ganging up thing. Oop, that's the cops. It's the woke police coming to get me. Leith is a bit like downtown Manhattan. I was thinking of calling it Tiny Manhattan for a while, and I just leave stuff like this on my productions, hope you don't mind. At least you know it's an authentic production from a totally bootleg and barely competent and half baked and sort of small time Mickey Mouse. But okay. Can we get back to the serious thing? Right, so you're saying how you're going to try and balance the equation by offering remedy for the violations of rights and liberties for not just women, but also men and women's liberty, and every other gender in between, and anyone without a clear gender and a human being of any kind, to have exactly the same standard of gender liberty and freedom. And obviously, this is something that your sort of silly little Scottish country are trying to do, isn't it? Really? What on earth was that? Cat is doing something rag. Cat in a box. So the live nature, improv nature of this coverage is a sort of, it undermines the seriousness a little bit, don't you think? Well, that's kind of the point, man. Right? I think we take the heat out of it a little bit. That's my way forward as a politician. Dadifesto will be looking to protect men from the suicidal, social death, state led murders that are going on constantly up and down the country right now, led by two services, the child maintenance services and the, what do you call them, the legal child services court, the sort of Mickey Mouse family court in England, Wales, and Scotland. They're all the same Mickey Mouse skullduggery, money making people who are all incentivized to make huge sums of money by tearing families apart most easily, conveniently, and without any real opposition or challenge at all. They can do this by just targeting the male. No matter the horror show, no matter the nightmares, no matter the absolute horrific scenarios of abuse and vulnerability and terrifying child situations that are faced by children, these lawyers, cops, social workers, blah, 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 they don't care. They don't care. There's a systemic murdering of men going on through the system. There is. And it being denied is anti feminist. It being denied is what lets young children end up in the hands of these abusers. It's the people who are making that happen. I think they're doing it to working class families intentionally because they get lots of working class babies vulnerable, and lots of vulnerable babies and children is absolute Christmas for the freaks that we're up against. So, anywhere where there are gender rights, reproductive rights violations at all, you will find me hopping mad, angry, and raging like I am about the sheer pile of bodies of dead fathers that there is behind that. And that is why that logo is the skull. Because if, dear father out there experiencing this, you know, and I'm saying to you now, I know now how bad it is. I did not know before. I did not know before, and I beg for forgiveness. I had no, even when I was doing anti suicide work, I had no idea how utterly broken, morally bankrupt, and akin to slavery the conditions are in our legal system for fathers. It is just as deadly as the wanton rape gangs and the wanton despicable misogyny that we need to deal with. Both on either side outrage me to the same equality. It doesn't matter the numbers, statistics, whatever. Come on, what are we going to bicker about? How many dads are dead and how many people have been raped? Why don't we just do something useful, like come up with a gender positive, gender justice campaign where we're going to protect everyone? How difficult is that? Where do you think abuse comes from? Abuse is a pattern, right? Abuse is a cycle, a trauma cycle. My constitution, which we'll move on to, is about protecting childhood, and that's why that is a Dadifesto, and that's why that is a Magdalene Act. And those are the two proposals you'll get from me in conjunction with, not to be confused with, the constitutional document that I'm proposing for all candidates, which is called Epoch Nova. Let's have a look at that now, all right? Good Lord. Okay, and take a little chill pill on the way if you don't mind. Thank you. Ho, ho, death. Ho, ho, death. Won't you spare me over till another year? Is that your little song about death? It's quite creepy, you know. I want it to be kind of creepy, mate. If I'm honest, it's meant to inspire the feelings of wow, this stuff is so serious. I cannot imagine anything more serious than protecting the liberty of our loved ones, our vulnerable ones, from violations that are in the most intimate way, that are violations where one's heritage is at stake, where the good names of one's relatives and loved ones are under assault, where there is social rejection. There are kind of crazy things like honor killings in the world. There are some parents that just will not allow their children to be happy or to reproduce healthily and will affect their kids' development. We bond as humans in a way that is deeper than most other species. It's arguably, I think, our thing that makes us so special and spectacular and build towns and cities and write beautiful songs and poems. Having violations in this area, having set of the health dysfunctions, what we need in this area is instead of the finger pointing and the contempt and the hatred, but instead the forgiving and the union and the tolerating and the learning and the forgiving. And that is what you need. There is no use in continuing abuse cycles. One must exit abuse relationships. One must figure out if relationships are abusive or not and get out of them and not have family and children within abusive relationships if one can avoid it. And if one is going to have family and children and there is an accidental discovery of abuse dynamics and all the rest of it, that child deserves the rights and access to both parents. It is inherently an act of abuse towards a child to remove one of the other parents. There is no greater abuse than any other. I mean, short of killing the child or trying to kill the child, there really isn't. You know what I mean? These separations and violations of family that are going on in the law, as if it is reasonable, as if it is constitutional. There is no liberty without this liberty. People who remove this liberty or want to remove this liberty are fascists, are colonizers, are class war fighting really sadistic, usually posh middle class people, but also just very dysfunctional working class people, neglected people. But the posh, more posh you get, the worse these kind of dehumanizations actually become, I think. And then also at the bottom of the end of the abuse spectrum, things are pretty horrific there too. We must have universal protections for children. Children being caught up in this absurd gender conflict, in this absurd gender boys versus girls. I hate you, you hate you hate each other, falling out while there are babies and children around is complete failure of social stability. A complete failure of us to guarantee that children have a good start in life is what I have witnessed. I have witnessed in ways that I cannot disclose and will never disclose unless it's safe to do so, reasonable to do so. I don't need to disclose because there is abundant evidence the violations, whether that be to do with a woman's right to choose whether she gets to have children when she wants to have them with whom she wants to have them, or for fathers to be there and in the life of their children, the children to benefit from both mother and father's attention, regardless of how one parent might feel about the other. These are so transcendent, are they not? These mortal images I'm trying to use about heaven and death and purgatory and these skulls are here to represent the mortality of these violations of liberty. I'm doing my best to articulate what is unifying about the whole gender debate is that we care more than anything about who becomes who we pair with, who we mate with, who we build our lives around, and how we raise our children. And if both parents are not able to honor that child with their upbringing, however imperfect and flawed and whatever unfashionable or traditional or hyper modern or toxic feminist even or toxic masculine even whatever. I want a world where the separation of parents from their kids is completely abolished in the way the death penalty is now. It is on the internet very clearly articulated as the most draconian thing you can do after the death penalty for the reason that just like rapes and ignoring the circumstances that rape presents one with, the circumstances that rape presents for the child thereafter, the circumstances that that presents for the family going forward, the violation that it is, consent, consent must prevail. The logic of consent thinking is irrefutable. The logic of do no harm is irrefutable. There is no basis for parental removal via these parental violations that are done, and largely, but not exclusively, by private sector. The state is a willing participant in child and baby separations. Has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, and everybody doing it right now, every single one of the people doing this right now, let's just be absolutely clear, 100% of the people carrying out these heinous violations of liberty will also be acting in two possible ways. Either like they are the victim of something themselves, number one, or that they are God's gift to the thing, whether it be God's gift to women, God's gift to, to motherhood, God gifts to men. I don't know what I mean. The idea that you have a narcissistic presentation and people do not immediately assume and recognize what that is and what that means. If someone is thinking that they are above and beyond justice, if someone thinks that they are above and beyond morality, someone thinks that their rights, their personal individual status, reputation, etc., are transcendent of that of children, the rights of children to exist, the rights of children to be happy, to be free of harm, the rights of fathers and children to be together, and mothers and children to be together. This can be done by the economy. If you think about it, the economy is doing this above all, right? If you think about it, the economy is by far and away a, a big driver of this, right? Because it's not possible really to get by and have kids and have a stable life in the absolute political chaos that we currently live, and the absolute doomedness in which we all sort of exist all the time. And we do have very pathological situations for parenting, deeply problematic situations for parenting, particularly if you are a working class person. If you're a hyper middle class, middle person, privileged person, you've got a lot more safety nets and escape routes. But the trouble is that what that means is that for the kids caught in these scenarios, the kids get bunged into private schools, or they get raised by the staff, or they get hauled around. Like, I really want to change our culture, our society in a way that does preserve the family unit. But I cannot and will not do this in some toxic religious way. All parenting is legitimate, right? All parents and babies just need loving humans around them at all times. And humans that love them should be allowed access to them. The idea that there are these separations are tolerated without outrage, it leads to huge amounts of male death and suicide. And when you treat a person like an animal, how do they start to behave? They start to behave like an animal, don't they? Well, I don't accept treating humans of any gender like an animal. I don't accept treating humans of any gender like they are inherently abusive because of their existence, like they're inherently toxic, or because they're inherently hyper feminist or inherently hyper wokeism, whatever toxic hatred, or can add in all this sort of witchcraft and sort of creepy pedo hyper toxic stuff that the far right points the finger at. We cannot have hatred within our politics at all anymore. Okay, if we're going to have a trauma informed future with healthy, stable families where there is union, reliable union enough to raise children who then grow up to not suffer from chronic anxiety, chronic disease, chronic neglect, and then feelings of, frankly, detachment and psychopathy, and then taking things out on the world. We have got a very miserable, lost generation, I think, brewing here. All these things, I think the far right say them, and I'm kind of echoing them, but from a kind of more liberal perspective, I hope. So no one deserves the fate that befalls them when their liberty, any of these liberties, that be the right to not be raped, the right to choose whether you keep baby, not have baby, when you have baby, who you sleep with, who you don't sleep with, who you marry, who you don't marry. These things are so serious and mortal, guys. And it's I can't get through it without being triggering, upsetting. So forgive me for all the offensive things I'm saying accidentally. All this meant with good intent, and all this meant to reinforce the feeling that those listening to this, all the diverse ways and interdimensional ways that you will have met up with these issues and suffered as a result, whether you were the child, the mum, the dad, whatever, whoever it is, and the lost one in between. Um, we just want an end to hatred, and we want to have a world where there is as little of this toxic relationship family breakdown, which is at the top of all the scores for the mental health crisis. Okay, well, that's enough of a rant there. Yeah, well, that was a bit of a sort of bizarre blancmange of a rant, but we'll let you go. You're going to move on to your. I think it's more about politics and elections now, really. You're planning to try and win an election using a constitution as your core principles and core values that indicates your beliefs about how these things should function, a kind of secular, postmodern sort of constitutional sort of reboot of the old American Constitution, some of those things. And then also, up front, you're coming in with two pieces of legislation, coming called a Megalyn Act and something called a Dadifesto, which is a bit like manifesto, but with dad in it instead of man, so that you don't get sort of accused of doing male victimhood. Thanks, man. Do you know, it's good to have you around, brother. You're actually better at some of this than me. Right? Can we move on now? Can you want to do the summary as well? Yes, I shall. I'm getting quite into it now. I think I am properly woke now. Thank you. Get out of my way. Move. Hurry up. Okay. So for the audience, better buckle up for a tone shift. Is that right? So this is a little bit of a shift in tone, Mister Dan. Sort of taking a bit of a more serious mode. This whole holy presentation here. Yeah, forgive me. It's a little bit indulgence, but I want to talk about the open source medicine thing. 'Cause I think it's relevant in the gender context. Is your access to medical treatments, medicines? This has become a very hot topic. Legitimately so. Everybody involved very concerned. Sometimes legitimately, mostly legitimately, I guess. But the issue fundamentally just comes down to liberty, doesn't it? Really, um, uh, the oath to liberty is backed up with this proposal for how we could run health and medicine in our future. Um, so that would be the brand under which I try to build concepts of how to really take medicine and healthcare, health provision, the national care service that we'd like to have in this country, in the UK, and also discussing it from an American perspective as well to try and see if one could simultaneously repair the corporate damage coming from both pinch points. There's a corporate pinch point in the UK, which is up at the state level, where healthcare is denied to the vast majority of people just by sort of class warfare going on either directly in wards and clinics all over the country, or more just at the pinch point of denying to actually even pay for such people to come and dehumanize the people who suffer from disease. So, in that context, I always like to refer to my mother. It's a little bit of a breach of contract to identify a family member for me, but my mother is deceased, and the whole point is the campaign is a little bit of a memorial act, to be honest. It's massively unfinished business from my life long before this campaign. 2011 was when my mother passed away from glioblastoma, which is a horrific brain disease, charmingly referred to as the Terminator by neurotypes and oncology types. Um, what we'll move on to now is talking about the liberty element. Okay, so health and liberty are intrinsically linked by what I call total health liberty. It's a concept of saying if a person does have access to full liberty, to their full total health liberty, this would be the ideal achievable prospect under this sort of direction of travel in politics, is that people would have abundant knowledge, abundant resources, and absolutely no limitations on choice or access to medicine all over the world. This is the direction of travel for humanity. Let's go, shall we? Okay, so let's go a bit deeper on this thing then. This is, to me, this seems a little bit like quackery. I've got to be honest. Some of it is a bit quackery. Quackery, man. Dude, what I'm saying, how much is this quackery? Look, one of the big problems we've got, yeah, is what people's beliefs are in their heads about the world and reality, right? So if they think that there's a big God in the sky watching them and judging them for masturbation and stuff, right? What do you think that does to a person? But don't say masturbation to me, young man. Just keep it clean in here, right? Don't have a serious discussion. Look, this is a serious discussion, and we have to be able to just destigmatize and de-taboo things. People like to fuck each other. They do. Well, don't say it quietly. It doesn't make a difference if you say it quietly. People like to fornicate like mad buggers. I know. But we have to sort of explain to young people, look, you're going to want to fornicate like mad buggers. There's nothing wrong with it. Don't hate yourself. Just sort of cope with it in a sort of chilled out way, and hopefully find someone that you love is affectionate, kind, and gentle, and you can just sort of experiment with that person, get on with having a happy life. Yes, exactly. And some people, like, I think one of the best examples of this kind of thing I'm talking about is have you watched Borat? But is that the one with the naked wrestling in the hotel room? I've got to be honest, I sort of got that far and just I couldn't keep going any further. I thought his quest for Pamela Anderson was hilarious. Like, I've been on many similar quests myself. I think you're on one right now. You're not. I, no. Not a quest. I am not on a quest for some super famous person. No, no. Although it would be cool, right? Look, so you're a horny bugger. That's your problem. Just horny all the time. Well, men are horny all the time. Okay, well, it's just who we are. I mean, and actually, I don't think there's evidence. And correct me if I'm wrong. People can comment. I don't think there's much difference in the horny levels really when you break it down. I've done a lot of studies, and like, sadly, there's sort of deficit in capacity to indulge. My point is, sex positivity. Oh God, oh God! Don't say things like that. For God's sake, man, we're trying to have a man-to-man talk here. It's a serious political talk. We have to make it all about stuff that's below the belt. Exactly below the belt, mate. That's where I want. I want to get this stuff kind of out of politics. Well, into politics to get it out of politics. You know what I mean? In and out. You say. Instead, just say, don't, do not lower the tone if you don't mind. Try to stick to the thing here. Look, it says there is no liberty in the darkness of ignorance. Explain that. Well, exactly. If you've either got the state weirdos telling you stuff like there's no parents don't have a right equal rights, or if they're telling you things like women are all the same, they're telling you things like whatever it could be. Like with Borat, it was there were teeth inside the vagina. That's vulgar. Don't say vagina, right? There's a new girl on Mehdi Hassan's channel who just keeps saying vagina. I'm like, she's just vagina. Ah! Don't say that. I'm watching the news, madam. Madam, do you mind? Keep the below the belt stuff out of here. And then keep the below the belt stuff completely out of here if you don't mind. And but how do we do that? Well, exactly. We need to legislate and protect in a way to make sure that the whole. For me, it's got to be the schools, isn't it? God help the poor schools. How do we get to cut through all the mumbo jumbo that kids are being directed, whether that be toxic stuff like you're just effectively a fleshlight for some man on the internet. Like that's basically just the cultures of toxicity and in power and abuse of power to commodify almost always the beautiful female form because. If you think about it, there is not really a single product in the world that's not sold with that, with the enticement and sort of titillation and whatnot. And I think it's important to understand for young guys to understand, look, you are perpetually being manipulated in this way by the marketing and the world. It's like very, very toxic ideas about looking at women in certain ways or treating women in certain ways projected upon us. We need to have safety. I don't know. I cannot be the arbiter for all those things, right? I can't. I just don't have the knowledge. I don't think any one person can. So how do you get constitutional protections? And this is the thing, we're talking in America right now about how that constitution has failed, right? So I'm trying to build a one that will not fail so much, right? So in this one, I've gone a little bit deeper into it and said, look, you have to understand that humans are mammals. There is normal mammalian reproductive behavior going on. Some of that can lead to people doing rapey things, the violent, abusive things that are non-consensual, and we don't want to tolerate that. So that young people, particularly, the most vulnerable targets, let's just say, are equipped with basic knowledge about what to tolerate, what not to tolerate, whom to report to when somebody is taking advantage of them. So this stuff is very serious content and can and hopefully will prevent a great deal of harm and cycles of harm and breaking the cycles of harm. It must begin in childhood. We have to protect childhood. And in childhood, you must have access to scientific anatomical knowledge about who you are, how your body works. I really feel very strongly that any kind of operation upon as again we're dealing with, it's really what I would like to do for the trans people and all that whole issue with they're saying this is barbarism and genital mutilation and blah blah blah. Like they've now again, these people are so pathologically stupid and unable to restrain themselves with their hatred and their contempt towards specific people and things that the way they're choosing making choices like that way, that they'll say that GM is an appalling thing and shouldn't be tolerated and it's outrageous, it's wrong. Well, what I think the independent politician like me should do, well, oh, cool, right, well, let's take that. So we're going to just get rid of all the GM then, right? Whether it be the corporate stuff that's going on in America, that is probably the center of the male crisis in the known universe, where they're the most unhappy, unsatisfied, miserable men who cannot hurt women enough or be ignorant towards women enough or be cruel to women enough or strangle women enough or thump them and throw them around and treat them like garbage enough. It's appalling what is going on with these men in America and the industry they've created. I don't really see that in a lot of other places. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But I think that the audience maybe could accept that America has become a little bit of a center of this crisis of masculinity. And I definitely would put it into the dehumanizing cultures, the dehumanizing training. We're sort of trained to dehumanize there. So how do we get out of that? We have to sort of, I think, do very liberal things, very liberal things that are very liberal and maybe very triggering. But above all, protecting children at that age where they ought not be exposed to adult situations until they're ready. They basically just are not ready, cannot consent. There's no business in protecting children with knowledge. It's this really interesting thing, isn't it? Like the liberals, the fascist liberals will tell us that they want to have more Bibles in schools and all these values and that at the same time as saying that they want the liberal freedom. Well, we can weaponize these things. We can turn these things inside out and guarantee, I think, an open educational, what would you say, curriculum about mammals and humans and advanced primates and the things that we're inclined to do. Men, you will be inclined to this. You may have this in your head. You may have these ideas. They're just kind of primate-ish hangovers, and you should not. Neither should you engage with them, but you should not consider yourself a monster or a beast, because you are only a monster and a beast when you choose to take those thoughts and act them out in reality. That goes the same for girls too. Girls will have stuff in their head that they're ashamed of. Girls will have things in their head they're like, oh my god, I can't believe this is in my. fantasizing about this, or this is in my head, or this is like, these could be trauma experiences. Number one concern: have you been interfered with inappropriately by a family member, a church member, I don't know, a police officer, school teacher, whatever the hell, whoever, someone of power abused power with you? Did they? Maybe check it out, figure it out, particularly if you've got chronic pelvic pain. But meanwhile, when it comes to stuff like making sure kids have access to reproductive liberty and rights and protections and all these things, apart from equipping children with strength and courage and knowledge, it means kind of mature. So for me, I think that we would need to be looking at the age of consent. By the way, that's coming up in a feature. Well, I'll just mention that now. Age of consent going in the direction of increasing the age of consent, so protecting younger people more from older people, but not creating spaces where sort of young people are being penalized in a silly way. So you'd have a paradoxical, what do you call it, pragmatic age of consent, where between the ages of, like, say, this current 16, isn't it? So 16 is fine. Not in any way lowering. No, 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 red alert. None of that. People that are up for that, be very dubious about that. I'm not up for that at all. The young people need protection better than they've ever had before in the new age. Young people, children, need to be protected from invasions of their liberty, rape-like activities, pedophile-type activities. These will come from the church, they will come from the state, and they will come from powerful corporations and institutions. They will not come from random trans people in the bathroom. So there's a completely unintelligent way of dealing with real problems going on. Saying the real problems don't exist is not effective. You have to accept that the problems are there and deal with them as they are. And that comes for, like, the father side of it, the trans side of it, the general population female side of it. All these violations and inappropriateness, it must come to an end and get us to a decency. The new age will be an age of decency with lots of sex positivity, but nowhere near the young people. And the young people will be very, very protected from it, not exposed on the internet, not exposed in the schools by whomever, and certainly not interfered with by medical professionals doing weird stuff that doesn't need to happen, etc., etc., etc. Change. There is no liberty in the darkness of ignorance. If I don't know how bad it is for fathers in the post whatever separation divorcee thing, all that, how bad it actually is something I'm completely ignorant of, I cannot be a proper full feminist because that's a gender aspect where there's no equality and equity and I'm just ignoring it. The same goes for these aspects. So, the male audience, you must become more comprehensive of what it is like to be a woman and what it's like to be a girl and what it's like to be vulnerable in these ways. And I honestly think that younger need protected, protected, protected. And if we do that, I think we'll do a lot better. I think we'll get these patterns of abuse under control, I think, if we get childhood protected. So, the New Age Constitution is a primary objective, although it's removing corruption, an anti-corruption document. Removing corruption will protect children because pedophiles and these Nazi people, they use corruption to get their hands on vulnerable people. They need a factory for children being separated from parents and all the rest of it to expose them to harm that they wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. Okay, and to make them more vulnerable. I don't think there should be any confusion about this at all. Liberty has to have knowledge. You cannot really consent without knowledge. Do you understand? That's what the argument of consent is. People have to be fully aware of their choices that they're making. And if they're innocent and they're, again, making mistakes because they're young and doing so, there has to be space, I think, for that error too, because people will make mistakes at young age, I guess. So protect, 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 protect. Inform, inform, inform. All right. Let's move on, shall we? Before we start talking about the damn fossil record, and we're here until the sort of digital age is completely over. Thanks, man. There is always a reason after all. Yeah, very funny, right? The vow of reason, as you remember, is another piece of the Epoch Nova Constitution thing that I have produced, and it is very much a sort of cut and shut, hacking, stealing, thieving, burning, not burning, celebrating and honoring, and doffing my cap, and hopefully trying to get as much US buy-in as possible with my ideas to try and get this idea forward. Is I, the candidate, shall make no law on the basis of religion. This is the traditional kind of Bill of Rights, thing from the great American Constitution. Solidarity, love to America, although you're slipping into fascism. We know you're all not all fascists, and we know that we can redeem horrible countries, fascist countries, to being quite good countries, not decent countries. This one, for example. So it says here, I, the candidate, shall never respect the law of favor establishing religion and law over secular humanism. Secular humanism. No more weird hippie dip. Well, not hippie dippy. I'm the hippie dippy. You know what I mean? No more religiosity mumbo jumbo. No sort of weird Sunday songs of praise type people governing your lives and sex lives. Okay, we just have no time for that at all. And it says here, further to that, the candidate never tolerate any power, state, or private interest prohibiting free exercise. So to keep actual religious people free themselves so that they can be religious and that their preferences are not being messed with by wokey Wokerson people, it's there. And it says here,
apart from where women are not treated as equals and children are not being kept safe or exposed to hatred or suffering violations of their liberty. And thus, the childhood liberty, women's liberty, sort of added in there. Hopefully, that will make a dent. You know, the candidate, the next is about freedom of speech, consent. We discussed that already. Censorship and consent. A little bit more about consent later on. The age of consent banter. The free speech absolutism, purism of this candidate only applies to empirical matters of well evidenced truth beyond reasonable doubt. I, the candidate, shall defend the press and rights of the people. So it's all very much in line with the American Constitution. Just that wee addition there. Women are not treated as equals in religion, and thus religion cannot have anything to do with state business or medicine or the care of children or the education of children, quite frankly, in my future. I'm sorry, but I do not respect faith schools. If you work in a faith school or you have chosen to put your kids in a faith school, I find that completely intolerable and barely tolerable in real life and quite offensive because you could not do anything more to sabotage the lives of women than support religiosity and religion in the minds of young people. You could not do more to teach men harmful ideas. You could not do more to teach women toxic ideas than force them through religious educations. They are nearly as bad as toxic consumerist educations. But how kids are treated, what being exposed to hatred is really important. Exposing religion is a hate campaign, usually almost exclusively against women, but also against gay people and all these other groups that they target. Absolutely toxic, no place in a civilized society, some of these religious beliefs. And you can't get them to change or reform or whatever, because every now and then a little sect of them will pop up and they'll start doing mujahideen type stuff and they'll get all really dark ages on us and go backwards into time, into little horse and cart type lifestyles. I don't want to completely prevent people from doing those kind of things, but if women are being harmed and kids are not safe, then yes, basically, yeah, sorry, it's got to be done. All right. So, a bit interventionist there, but also very, very, very grounded in liberalism and the right to be practicing your religion, just as long as it's not hurting anyone. Not difficult, is it? Well, it might be difficult. We have to see.
I get the feeling that you're a bit of an anti-religious person, Mr. Dunn. Don't take that the wrong way, but a sort of Dawkins-ish person, you know? Dawkins-ish. Yes, you know, Rich Dawkins and those sort of, cod philosophers of the last sort of 10, 15 years, whatever. You've obviously been exposed to a lot of that stuff. Why would anyone care, really? Oh, good question. I don't know. I mean, like a lot of this is just really talking through my ideas, what I think. So, because I'm trying to run to be a politician, or at least get my ideas out there for other politicians to use them more effectively than me to get to change. But overall, our goal is change, justice, the Constitution there. The Pink Panthers is a kind of, it's a fictional thing. It's kind of like something I'm doing to explore mentally the world of sci-fi and dystopia and stuff. I'm kind of into that stuff. I think it's kind of cool. I think it's fun. Like you recently discussed on a recent podcast, the Terminator 2 being one of the greatest, if not the what. Hold on a minute, one of the greatest. Listen, settled subject. That is a settled matter. Terminator 2: Judgment Day is the greatest sci-fi action movie of all time, and that's it. I mean, I know that you're a fan of Avatar and whatnot. Dude, I love Avatar. I'll defend Avatar all day. But I think and it's a politically sound one as well. It's all about nature and it really sort of pushes the buttons in terms of ecological thinking and things like that. I love all that stuff. James Cameron's done all right, hasn't he? Did some nut stuff with the Abyss. Listen, this is completely irrelevant nonsense. Thanks for tuning out and enjoying a very tangential podcast style video from me, the Manchurian candidate. Part three, more gender related banter, but really we will come back to this whole notion of a sort of radical extremist. Remember that it's satirical, you understand? Like, I've done a long video on the YouTube all about the Pink Panthers, okay? So, the stuff coming up in the next clip, part three, is like, okay, ideas. How do you really get to this kind of post rape environment where such things will not be tolerated? And as I've stated in the goal of the legislation, the Magdalene Act, it's like, how do we get it so rare that it's as rare as the burning of witches? And that's the kind of thing that we want to achieve. And I don't see why it's not really achievable if you think about it, right? So, good luck, folks. Thanks for listening. Part three is on its way shortly. Jolly good. Crack on. Good old feminist banter. Hopefully, don't throw too many spears and stones and things at this man. He's trying his best. He's ignorant and all the rest of it. We can all help him, surely. If don't give up on people, even if they are so utterly bemused, so utterly baffled, so utterly confused, so utterly detached, so utterly unhinged, so utterly incompetent, so utterly far removed from any kind of common sense grounded in reality this man is. Look, man, get yourself an alter ego too. It's hilarious. Bye, bye.